Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crypto Current. Your host here, Richard Carthon. And today I have a special guest all the way out in the Bay Area working on a really cool project called Findora. He's the VP of product at a really cool company coming to make this a reality. We have Warren. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Richard.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for joining us. Before we dive into all the really cool on-chain confidentiality for stablecoins, wrap tokens, NFTs, DeFi, and so much more that is on Findora, first want to learn a little bit more about you. Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. I was born and raised in California, kind of classic California surfer guy, still surf. But I ended up going to undergrad at Northwestern out in Chicago and got exposed to the wonderful Midwestern hospitality and, made a lot of great friends there. Played a little bit of American football in the Big Ten. So, hung up my cleats and started getting into tech more deeply. Did a grad program at Harvard, and that's where I started my first tech startup. We had a small acquisition, which led to a series of two other startups in the hardware space, which didn't work out very well. Hardware is, as they say, is hard. And back then it was still very expensive. You couldn't, we didn't have access to 3D printers like nowadays. So the rapid prototyping was, several months and thousands of dollars. I love seeing, all the advancements in the hardware space to make things cheaper. But and then that's pretty much it. And then I one day stumbled on crypto.
Well, let me stop you there real quick. So what's amazing is you have this unique background where, you got to go play sports in college. I did as well. And I think being a student athlete and then going into the academics, you kind of bring that intensity of what you want to study and what you want to learn kind of off the field, and you make it something you're very passionate about. And you really want to be, incredible at your craft at what you do. And so it's cool that you were able to take that into technology, able to get into as amazing school as Harvard, and then to go on and be in the entrepreneurial space. And so going into mining and figuring out how the 3D graphing and then taking that space, I believe, over into mining. Can you tell us a little bit how that kind of correlated into your crypto journey and how that all started?
Yeah, definitely. We were doing a lot of hardware kind of PCB design, which required some access to servers. I spent a lot of, nights that were just, basically doing the renderings of these 3D images of the hardware. And one night I was just on Twitter, I think it was in 2011, and someone linked to this interesting kind of digital cash. And I clicked on the link, and it was linked to the Bitcoin white paper. And I read through it. It's actually, it's pretty readable if anyone's actually read it. It's only 9 pages. And I read it again. And, now everything just started kind of rotating, going, man, this is really cool. So I think I went to bed at 5 a.m., that morning, just, thinking about it. The next day, I decided to actually spin up the original Bitcoin QT client, which is kind of the original wallet and kind of client to manage a node, and actually got a miner running on my laptop, because you could still mine on the CPU then. And it was a hobby basically for from that period on, for about 2 years. Eventually, the hash rate got, increased, and, CPUs became, no longer, competitive. So then we upgraded the GPUs, and then once it went into ASICs, that's when I knew I wasn't going to be able to compete with but I got exposed to technology, and it was just a great way to kind of put your foot in, without getting overly involved. But I also started to notice in 2013 that some legitimate entrepreneurs were starting to enter the space. Venture capitalists were investing money in these entrepreneurs, and it was no longer becoming kind of a fringe, technology that's you can only find on different IRC or different chat forums. It was actually people were showing face and saying, "I'm working on this technology. I believe in it." And it was becoming at that point what we thought more mainstream, but had no idea how mainstream that would get in the short course of 10 years.
No doubt, man. It's really cool that you were able to be exposed to Bitcoin as early as you did, 2011, and be able to read the white paper over and over again. It clicked, and then to start mining on a laptop. And so as you start to look into this, and you're like, okay, this is becoming more legitimate. This is something I need to pay attention to. At what point did you then get your career more into the crypto space?
Yeah, so in 2013, I had and it was going through the painful process of shutting down the last of the two hardware startups, and I'd been doing this mining and stuff, and I noticed that more and more attention was being drawn to crypto. So I started playing around with the technology itself, and coming up with some ideas on what could be built in the space, and moved out to the Bay Area and actually raised a seed round from Tim Draper, Mark Benioff, and the Boost VC, run by Tim's son, Adam Draper, and Brayton. And those guys were just like super crazy, but it was a fun environment. It was very
So that's really cool, man. So now it's 2011 and you've been in the space for 2 years now, and you start to see, you checked out the white paper, read it multiple times, and you're saying, wow, this is a legitimate thing. Is this the point at which you decided this is where I want to start to build and work in my career?
Yeah. So, at the time, I think in 2013, I'd, been doing a little bit of mining as a hobby. It's kind of like tending to a garden. You get some good fruits and sometimes not. So back then the network, the Bitcoin network wasn't as stable as it is today. So a lot of the individual nodes would kind of drop off and you restart it, or you kind of start it later, but I had just gotten through the process of actually shutting down my second and last hardware startup. So was kind of looking for the next thing I wanted to really sink my teeth into. And I went back to, my hobby, saying, wow, maybe I parlay this into an actual, career, or at least a job. And, at the time, no one's hiring. And I had, I'd been entrepreneur for several years. So I immediately thought, okay, I want to start a company in the space. So came up, with some ideas, met a few people when I moved out to the Bay Area, and raised some funding for a company called Hedgy that I co-founded with a few others. It was effectively one of the first Bitcoin OTC wholesale markets. So we actually built a platform, a smart contract platform on Bitcoin, using Bitcoin script and multi-sig technology to allow Bitcoin miners to actually hedge the volatility of their Bitcoin. So they knew exactly, how much Bitcoin they could potentially, mine in 30 days. They didn't know what the price would be. And at the time, miners weren't venture backed. They were kind of, just small businesses that had fixed costs. So every time they would, mine, they would sell their Bitcoin, they'd sell it on exchanges, which would tank the price. And, you'd end up in these big spikes. So we wanted to introduce and kind of build out and help build out an OTC market, for Bitcoin, which really didn't exist at the time. So, this platform would kind of help the Bitcoin miners to sell to institutional investors, which were, KYC'd and everything. And then it gave the institutional investors, access to, large, we call blocks of Bitcoin, and particularly Bitcoin that didn't have much transaction history. So institutions kind of liked, because they knew it was fresh coin. So we built that out for a couple of years. We ended up selling the platform to a company called Wire, which is kind of, they were, doing a lot of stuff back then.
We actually had someone previously on the show from Wire, so that's awesome.
Yeah, probably Mike or Yanni, the co-founders. Great guys, love them. They're kind of they've been at it, I think working on Wire since 2013. So definitely a long road. But and then 2016, I think. So I actually joined Ripple at the time, and for a Bitcoiner like me and like all my friends, joining Ripple was like, whoa, that's a completely different technology. But I kind of had wanted to get exposure to more technology outside of just classic kind of UTXO style Bitcoin networks. So I worked at Ripple on the product team. Worked on a variety of different open source protocols, some of the platforms and products. Built out some of the enterprise products, and generally just had a really good time. Ripple's a very well run kind of company with very mature leaders. So getting exposure to their leadership and mentorship was actually I think really foundational for my career. And then recently decided to after 4.5 years in investing there, decided to kind of jump ship and start something new.
Man, so again, a very robust background in the crypto space, and with all of that, being able to go from one company to another, seeing these opportunities, seeing how everything has been able to grow and kind of get you to this current place where you are, where you now starting your own company. Again, in doing Findora, what made you want to leave Ripple and create this? So first of all, what is Findora, and what is the problem that you're trying to solve right now in this space?
Yeah, sure. So I had found out about Findora through the Stanford blockchain conference, I think a couple of years ago. And it was actually a research project back then. And the researchers were doing some interesting work on particularly on using zero knowledge proofs to introduce privacy to public blockchain. So I saw an opportunity to join what's now called Discreet Labs as the VP product. And I joined at a time where Findora was still very much kind of in the research phase and hadn't really been production or commercial or industrialized into a commercial or production blockchain. And I thought this might be an interesting way to kind of parlay some of the lessons I've learned and talents that I've picked up over the course of the last several years working in blockchain, to apply that to a new layer 1 blockchain. So Findora is I've heard some people call it a more programmable version of Zcash, or a more ethical Monero. Those are just like what other people kind of refer to it, and I say, yeah, you want to call it whatever you want to call it. But those seem actually pretty applicable. It's more programmable than Zcash in the form that you can actually issue tokens, particularly private tokens, on the network. So imagine like an ERC20 style token, but that can be issued and managed in a private way. And there's a lot of reasons why that's important, particularly around kind of like stable coins. But you have the option, to be, fully private or more transparent, just like a classic, Bitcoin transaction. So there's a lot of, kind of choice that a user can have on like if they want to maintain their privacy or not. Right.
No, it's amazing that you're going in from an element, and even just using those two correlations between Zcash and a more ethical Monero, I immediately could picture what's trying to be accomplished. And as you're looking at privacy, because obviously privacy is very near and dear to you, and also being able to have a way to create something on top of your platform that others can use and send out. What do you think, as people begin to use Findora, like what do you think are some of the use cases that immediately people would be able to come and do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it kind of goes back to, I think there's a lot of great projects out there, and everyone's kind of, passionate about their projects. But there are very few projects that are actually purposeful. And purposeful meaning, they actually solve a problem. So I think, the Findora blockchain particularly solves an interesting problem around privacy. I think to date, the cryptocurrency or blockchain kind of industry has failed when it comes to privacy. And what I mean, the Bitcoin white paper, for instance, 9 pages, it only dedicates a half a page to privacy. And the suggestion is basically keep your public key private, which doesn't make sense because if I want you to send me Bitcoin, I got to share my public key. And then it says, rotate your key so that, every transaction is it can be changed. But that doesn't really mask the actual, the unspent, transactions that well. And then also it's not tenable for something like, an account-based, blockchain. So there's a lot of privacy guidelines on like what to do, but they're like, some of them are like 12 steps and require like, VPNing and doing, a bunch of like advanced kind of tradecraft that most people aren't just going to do it. They don't want to go to that extent. So I think, in some ways, we failed at privacy and it starts with making privacy more, simpler and more accessible, making it, optional, but also default, building it from the ground up. So that's really what Findora is kind of focused on, is making, those privacy systems really, really useful, and making them so easy to use that, they can be used by default. It's like very similar to when the dawn of the internet, before there was SSL or TLS, to the HTTPS to make browsing more secure and private. We're kind of in that phase right now where people can basically and understand exactly what you're looking up online. People can watch what you're paying for or transacting on these. I don't think that's what we want for users. So Findora is kind of focused on that. So a lot of use cases that kind of build on that. One is just classic payments use cases. 2 is token issuance and tokenization of different assets. And then we recently actually introduced the Ethereum virtual machine or EVM support for Findora. So you can actually use Ethereum precompiled contracts on Findora. You can also use all the Ethereum tools like Truffle to deploy and manage smart contracts on Findora. And you can also, issue similar to ERC20 tokens or the ERC 721 non-fungible tokens or NFTs on Findora. Now, the only wrinkle is the EVM piece we haven't introduced privacy to that piece yet. So the theory is, Findora does, scale and the transactions confirmed, a little bit better than Ethereum. So there might be some good utility around, offering, EVM support. And then eventually, we will introduce more privacy to the EVM, which we hope, will enhance the kind of retention of some of those users that are already utilizing, some of the core technology.
Yeah. When you're going with a lot of information with like zero proof knowledge and creating privacy and doing that, as soon as you bring in the Ethereum blockchain, unfortunately, a lot of that kind of goes out the window. And so it's very interesting to see how you're going to be able to still have the flexibility and the fluidity of being able to like go within these blockchains, have that interoperability, but still provide that privacy. So I think however you're able to create the same type of systems on your platform that play well with Ethereum, this could link up to more interoperability with other platforms looking for more privacy and secure ways as well. Is that kind of the play right now? Is like figuring out how do we do this with like an Ethereum blockchain, and then how do we scale that to other blockchains that are out there?
Exactly. Yeah. And, the way I look at, Findora, it's kind of like a 3rd generation blockchain. And what I mean by that is 3rd generation blockchains are incredibly modular, meaning they use like different components. So like, for instance, Findora uses Tendermint for consensus, which is a modular consensus design, which can be pulled out, or plugged in, and so we use that because, Tendermint is hardened, it's battle tested. We think it scales really well. So, we decided to use that. The modularity of the data storage layer and everything. So we've, created all these modules and kind of glued them together. It helps it better for testing and kind of more, security within the system. Third generation blockchains are also interoperable. So at that layer one, extending that interoperability through trustless bridges and other ways to kind of extend into these other networks, we think is really, really important. I've been, Bitcoin is kind of a monolith in the sense that it doesn't really work well with other networks, which is by its design, which is fine. I'm still a big believer in Bitcoin, but I think the market needs more interoperable blockchains as well, where you start to see interconnectivity across these blockchains, which are each blockchain is good for certain kind of use cases and attributes, but being able to transfer into other networks should be seamless. Unfortunately, it's not. They're very siloed. So I think third generation blockchains need to be more interoperable too. And then finally, I think a third generation blockchain also needs to be able to support the notion of self-sovereign identity. So that's one thing that has been missing from a lot of blockchains. But in order to have identity, you have to have privacy. So that's kind of the fourth pillar. Where privacy at the layer one can support more embedded identity at the across chain. You can use that identity for collateralization and everything for DeFi in a way that you still have control over your own identity and who has access to it. So I think that's really those are the kind of the four pillars that we see as these like a third blockchain. So that's what I think the future is, and there'll probably be more advanced blockchains that come out after in the future. But I think that's the cutting edge right now.
And I think you have a lot of great points there. And as you go back and re-listen to those 4 points, and everyone listening right now, I recommend that you do that. It's getting to the point where all 4 of those are working seamlessly. Just like you said about interoperability, it's a very hard gap to fill, in my opinion. And when I think about mass adoption, it's when you have all 4 of those working, you don't have to think twice about it. They're just happening. Just like you said, the way that I like to frame it is that there's a lot of islands that are being built and not enough bridges. And the companies that are coming together to create the bridges to merge all of these amazing islands together and build these highways so everything can flow a lot better. You being from the Bay Area, the Golden Gate Bridge, how important that was for building that and allowing a better flow of going from one side of a city to another. It's so important that companies begin to create these bridges, which is interoperability. And the 4 pillars you just said, as people are able to create them together, that's what I see as that next step of truly getting to a place where anyone can pick this up and start using it in a more comprehensive, secure, and safe way.
Yeah, definitely. I love the bridge analogy. It's especially with when you have Bay Area sports teams that are, they, like Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants, which happen to both be good this year. They're connected by a single bridge, right? So you get fans on both sides. There's a lot of tribalism in crypto, so maybe it's a way to connect the fans.
Exactly, man. But with that said, there's a lot going on in the greater crypto world. And, we talked a lot about privacy, but, there's the reoccurring every year, every bull cycle, every time it happens. One of the things that typically comes up is China banning crypto. What do you think? Why do you think this is a reoccurring thing that just keeps coming up?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I remember, China first kind of took or started indicating that they were going to, come out with something regarding crypto back in, I think it was December 2013. And that was right after, Bitcoin had raced up to 1,000, I think, per coin. And the market, all the headlines came out and everything. And then China followed up in early 2014, saying they were serious about, regulating cryptocurrency. Then you didn't really hear again, from them until I think it was 2017, which happened to be, another bull run. And there were a few times where, China indicated that they're going to crack down on cryptocurrencies. And I think this was the first time they said they're going to start cracking down on cryptocurrency exchanges, which are really the on-off ramp for people to access cryptocurrency. And then, again, the market crashed, and then no one heard about it again. And then it wasn't until just last year or earlier this year, China, again, kind of revisited it. But I think what's happening is each time, this comes out, it's actually a build. They're building on top of each other. It starts to kind of climb the hierarchy within, the Chinese kind of regulatory regime. And this time, I think it's actually, it's starting to have some teeth. It hasn't quite reached the level of enforcement, but I think it's starting to be kicked around at the legislative level. And you get, organizations like the Chinese Central Bank that are starting to voice, that they are going to regulate and ban, cryptocurrencies, largely because China is piloting, their version of a central bank digital currency called the digital yuan. So they want to make sure that digital yuan is widely adopted. They don't want any other cryptocurrency competitors, even though they have very different utilities. Where Bitcoin is very much what they call a store of value. It's a volatile asset. It's not really used that often in payment type use cases. Lightning Network, with as an exception. But so I think China is tightening up on cryptocurrencies largely because it wants to maintain control. And I think that the country wants to control things. Which is part of the culture. So I think it doesn't exactly have that set of teeth yet, but I think there is starting to be some movement. Some of the exchanges have announced that they're going to be restricting access to Chinese domestic citizens. And you start to hear more and more of these miners based in China that are going overseas. Some are setting up shop, ironically, in the U.S. Early days of mining, U.S. actually had a fair amount of miners, and now we're starting to see that industry return, which is, I think, in some respects, really good for the U.S. innovation. I think the U.S. has its own set of issues trying to create more clarity around how the American government's going to regulate cryptocurrencies, but at least they're not taking that strong cut like China is, and they're starting to listen more to some of the entrepreneurs and the creators and the investors and trying to be reasonable about the regulation. So it's definitely it's something to be concerned about, but I don't think these technologies are decentralized, and there will always be that decentralized element to them. So in some ways they're anti-fragile. They can't really be shut down, but they can make it difficult.
Right. A lot of great points to unpack there. The big one I'm going to take away is the CBDC, so the centralized banking digital currency, the digital yuan that China's trying to do. Ultimately, they want to be able to track everything, and that's a great way to do it. It's all on blockchain. It's a great way to have control over your people, and cryptocurrencies are a threat to that. So it makes sense that they're going to slowly try to evade it. But just like you said, crypto is inevitable. You cannot stop it. People are going to keep finding ways, and I think it's going to be one of the greatest liberators for financial wealth that the world has ever seen, and has already proven that, and will continue to prove so as time goes on. So, I mean, Warren, you've given us so much to think about. You've given us a lot of great information. What is the final thought that you want to leave with all of our listeners here today?
I'd probably say, be sure to keep your eyes on the topic of privacy. As these companies, grow bigger and bigger, the fangs of the world, privacy is becoming a bigger and bigger topic. I think that as users, we have to make sure that we defend our privacy and ensure that we have control over it. And it's something that should be also applied to cryptocurrency. We don't want to recreate the same mistakes that were made early days in the internet, where you just ended up with a handful of companies that kind of control a lot of the access. We want to ensure through the Web3 development that users do have more control, and that starts with the privacy. So I would definitely encourage people to get more involved, support some of the privacy initiatives kind of across the board, inside and outside of crypto and blockchain.
That's a final great thought. Privacy is important. It's essential to your livelihood, and it's important that we keep all furthering our lives and how we can keep things more secure. So I appreciate that final thought. What are ways that people can connect with you and learn more about what's going on with Findora?
Yeah, sure. So you can follow Findora. Findora Official is the Twitter handle. Findora.org is the website for the protocol. Discreet.io is the new website. I'm on Twitter at Warpaul. Definitely, try to taper into the crypto Twitter every now and then. Although it can be quite interesting.
Yes, it can.
It's definitely a fun bunch. So, yeah.
Sounds awesome. Well, again, Warren, thank you so much for spending time with us. And for everyone listening, stay cryptocurrent. Today's podcast is brought to you by Findora, a public blockchain with programmable privacy. Findora has on-chain confidentiality for stablecoins, wrapped tokens, NFTs, DeFi, and more. Findora solves the privacy issue inherent in today's blockchains, which is confidentiality, auditability, programmability, and interoperability. Findora provides you with the tools, documentation, and support to help you build your applications. For more information, go to Findora.org. Again, that's Findora.org.